We've been hearing a lot recently in the news about this whole idea of cap and trade. But nobody really explains to us, well, what does that actually mean? So let's go through an example here where we show what cap and trade really in fact is and how it can potentially be more effective as a policy tool and more efficient as a policy tool than some other options. Let's consider the following setup. So say we have these three companies. These three companies have initial levels of pollution as follows. We say firm A is currently polluting 70 units, firm B is polluting 80 units, and firm C, well, he's cleaner than the rest of them. He's only polluting 50 units. Let's also assume that each one of these different companies has a different cost of reducing this pollution. So it's most expensive for firm B to stop polluting. It costs $25 per unit there. And it's cheapest for firm C to stop polluting, where it only costs $10 per unit. Let's also say that we have a general goal of somehow reducing pollution to 120 units. You'll notice here that the current level of pollution is 70 plus 80 plus 50, which is 200 units. So we've got to somehow get rid of 80 units of pollution. The question then becomes, how can we do this in the most efficient way possible? Let's consider a very simple policy option here. One thing the government could say is, well, okay firms, you're going to need to have a permit now to pollute. For each unit of pollution you want to produce, you have to have a permit to accompany that, otherwise you're going to get in trouble. So one way to implement this would be to just give each of the firms 40 permits. You got three firms, that'd give us 120 units of pollution, or some sort of consequences if the firms don't comply. So, well, how much would this cost the system to actually reduce the pollution from 200 units to 120 units? Well, we can say if each of the firms has 40 permits, that means that each firm is allowed to emit 40 units of pollution. Well, firm A is currently at 70 units, so they're going to have to reduce by 30. Firm B is at 80 units, so they're going to have to reduce by 40. And firm C is at 50, so they're only going to have to reduce by 10 units. And because we said that the permits in this case were non-tradable, they have no option really but to figure out how to reduce their pollution. So we say, well, how much does this cost each of the companies? Well, firm A, if they need to reduce by 30 units, we said that it costs them $20 per unit to stop polluting. So 30 times 20 gives us, it's going to cost them $600 to reduce their pollution to the mandated level. Firm B, well, they need to reduce their pollution by 40 units. It costs them $25 per unit, 40 times 25. In total, it's going to cost them $1,000 to reduce their pollution to the mandated level. Firm C gets off a little easier here, because firm C only needs to reduce pollution by 10 units, and it only costs firm C $10 per unit to reduce their pollution. So they're only out $100. We say, well, how much does it cost the system overall to reduce pollution to the desired level? So well, we can just add up these numbers here. So well, 600 plus 1,000 plus 100 gives us $1,700. So the burden on these three firms to reduce pollution to the desired level is a combined $1,700. Economists are generally only really concerned about efficiency because it's something that is comparatively easy to measure. But when we're talking about any sort of political decision or policy case, it's also relevant to think about, well, is this fair? Is this going to go over well in a political arena? So we can see here that by allowing each firm to pollute the same amount, which on the surface may seem kind of fair, so actually we're imparting different costs on different firms. We're imparting a comparatively higher cost of $1,000 on firm B than we are on firm C. So one could argue that the fair thing to do would be to give out the permits such that each one of the firms had the same cost of reducing pollution to the necessary level. Unfortunately, that's something that's actually kind of hard to do because usually the government doesn't actually know these numbers. Think about, you could ask a company, well, how much does it cost for you to reduce pollution? well, that company is going to say, oh man, it's so expensive, like you have to let us pollute because we're going to go out of business if we can't pollute anymore. Well, you're not going to get a straight answer. So you can't really use that in an efficient way to say, well, how should these things be divvied up? It gets a little bit complicated, which is how the idea of tradable permits or cap and trade came about.